way, and some of the protesters are holding up their hands or telling them to stay in place, or I would think they're telling them to move back, and at some point they're going to have to get those people out of there so that they can reopen the road, because right now, and I'm not sure if we can take the DOT camera, right now the traffic is just backing way up all the way down the road. That could be somebody that tossed something off the bridge down at police there, or off the top of the road down at the police. You saw them move back, and so you're going to see a pretty swift response here. You're going to see the captains order the officers to get in there and to take care of this, because if they're throwing Molotov cocktails or some kind of smoke bomb or some kind of firework that it seemed like that was, police don't know what that is, and you have a high incidence that if something like that hits somebody, you could have shots fired back, you could have you know, all kinds of things can escalate very quickly if you start to get an officer hurt. So they're going to have to move in there and figure out what's going on. So you got multiple scenes here that they're having to deal with. There is an incident command center. They have activated all of that, and so there's a lot of communication going on right now, but these young people are, you know, celebrating their success at shutting the road down, creating havoc for so many other citizens.
Breaking news, local protesters are facing off with police in Seattle.
This all began after a grand jury decided not to charge a Ferguson, Missouri police officer in the death of an unarmed teenager.
The demonstration in Seattle had been mostly peaceful, but took a turn for the worse just within the last hour. KOMO 4's Joel Marino is with the group right now with the protesters who are still on the move. Joel?
Mary and Eric, they are still on the move. I am outside the East Police Precinct on Capitol Hill. Officers here have set up a barricade. The protesters have come up to challenge them in not allowing them through this street and onto the precinct or beyond. Musician Macklemore was out here a short time ago. Now, this group has been crisscrossing the city. I'm actually carrying my bags in tow. There was one aggressive confrontation that erupted on I-5, and we have some video of that we can show you right now. This is where riot police tried to hold the line when demonstrators attempted to enter the interstate to apparently disrupt traffic. Now, we saw protesters launch fireworks and smoke bombs at officers. The police, they responded with tear gas, and they also formed a barrier with their bicycles. And we did speak to several people about that confrontation with police when they were tear gassed. Let's hear from them now.
They sprayed it directly into people's eyes. We were doing nothing violent. We were holding on to each other, and they sprayed it right into our eyes.
Rubber bullets. Rubber bullets.
I've got a number of people trying to tell me what police have been doing to them just the past hour here. Now, the main body of protesters, it seems that they have splintered. We've got a group over there. We've got a group down the road. There is no exact... They all say that they are here for justice for Michael Brown, although it seems that there is a difference of opinions on how to achieve those goals. Right now, we understand that police are trying to get the information together on whether they've made any arrests. It does appear that way. We've seen some vandalism. It sounds like some things have been broken, nothing major that we've seen, a little graffiti. But there are still a number of people, a very active crowd and very angry crowd out here at this hour. That's the latest here in Seattle. Joel Marino, KOMO 4 News.
Joel, I want to ask you a question. From what you've seen so far tonight, how much of this is actual anger over the Michael Brown decision? How much of it is a desire to run loose and lawless in downtown Seattle?
Well, there's certainly some people who are here on behalf of Michael Brown. We've got some people using some profanity here, so I can't talk very long. But there are obviously some people that just want to break things, it appears that way, including this man who is using profanity right next to me. So I'll send it back to you.
All right, Joel, thank you very much.
Now to Ferguson, where anger and frustration is boiling over after the grand jury announcement.
The decision means there will be no arrest and no trial in the death of 18-year-old Michael Brown. ABC's Marcy Gonzalez has more from Ferguson.
Officer Darren Wilson walking free.
No probable cause exists to file any charge against Officer Wilson.
More than 3 months after he shot and killed unarmed teenager Michael Brown, a grand jury decided today Wilson will not face any charges.
We need to accept that this decision was the grand jury's to make. But I join Michael's parents in asking anyone who protests this decision to do so peacefully.
But already tonight, the protests have turned violent, with shots fired, a pizza shop and police cars set on fire, demonstrators throwing Molotov cocktails at police, and officers responding with smoke bombs and tear gas to break up the crowds. Law enforcement officials worry what we're seeing here tonight could continue to intensify, and they say they are prepared. With 1,000 extra officers on the streets, the National Guard and the FBI also here ready to offer backup.
Unfortunately, the non-indictment has just set off some feelings that have been somewhat repressed and suppressed for a long time.
Meanwhile, we're told Brown's mother broke down in tears when she learned the grand jury's decision. The family attorney saying justice was not served. While tonight, Officer Darren Wilson is still in hiding, now free if he chooses to continue working in law enforcement. And the evidence the grand jury reviewed in reaching this decision was made public tonight, including a transcript of Officer Wilson explaining how he acted in self-defense after he says Brown hit him repeatedly and tried to take his gun. Marcy Gonzalez, ABC News, Ferguson, Missouri.
Marcy, thank you very much. Seattle Mayor Ed Murray says he stands in solidarity with the African-American community. He held a press conference shortly after the Ferguson decision came down.
Many in the African-American community in Seattle and across the country are bound to feel that justice has not been served, and the experience is one of tremendous hurt.
The mayor says that today's decision will likely replicate the same pain caused by the death of Michael Brown, but he says Seattle is not Ferguson and that mistrust cannot divide our city. Police Chief Kathleen O'Toole urged all protesters to remain peaceful.
At Cherry Street. So now this crowd is starting to move back just a bit, but as you said, something that had been perfectly peaceful for a long time just turned violent here tonight, and now police are continuing to try to move these people off of this on-ramp. You can look back here this way a little bit. The crowd has shrunk just a little bit as the tear gas has come out, but they're not going anywhere, most of them. There are some who are very defiant. I've seen a couple of bottles being thrown out here and a lot of threats being made at police officers. Police have showed a lot of restraint for the majority of this evening, as far as I can tell, everything that we've seen. But now once you try to get on an interstate freeway, that's when they draw the line. And that's exactly what they've done here at Cherry and the on-ramp to northbound I-5, David.
Can you hear us, James? Before we let you go, what was really the changing point here? Was it them trying to get onto I-5? I mean, we checked back in with you, and it seems like it had turned from what seemed calm for almost all of the night, and now this situation that we see unraveling. What was the turning point?
Well, Marnie, for the majority of this evening, the police have pretty much let them go any way they want. They basically just follow them around, try to guide them in the right direction, but they've had pretty much free movement throughout the city of Seattle. Once they tried to get onto I-5, though, that seems to be where they draw the line. Obviously, that's the land of the state patrol, and they're not going to have that. Police seemed ready. They seemed to figure that that's exactly what they were going to try to do. That's what they did, and they stopped them. You've seen them there for the first time tonight. Some of these officers in riot gear. They've got their weapons with the tear gas grenades in them and the flashbangs, and they are using them. Right now, this crowd has moved back off of this ramp, or should I say, been forced back off of this ramp, and now they're standing around just trying to figure out what they're going to do next. If I could take Scott over here, I'll show you a group of these people on their knees right over here. They've been using that familiar chant, hands up, don't shoot. You look here on the street, and that's exactly what you see. A little fire being started over here as well. They've just extinguished that, but these people have moved out. Now they are on 7th Avenue, blocking the street here. Cops are blocking the street in all directions, and they say they want justice, and they want it now. I think it would be safe to assume now that police have them off of the on-ramp that they're going to once again let them go where they want to go, but at this particular moment, they don't seem like they're willing to go anywhere.
All right, James Lynch live there. Thanks very much. We're going to come back to you as soon as anything more develops there, which it likely will over the next few minutes. Let's take a live look at the DOT cameras, and you can see here where Cherry Street is blocked off, headed up to I-5, and so their main point here was not to let them get up on there onto that main highway, start blocking the road like we've seen in other cities, for example, in Oakland tonight, where they've gotten on there, and on the Triborough Bridge in New York, where protesters have also caused that bridge to be shut down. And so Seattle police letting them sort of congregate under there. Incidentally, that is right by police headquarters there at 5th and Cherry, and so police know that area well. It's kind of under that bridge, if you've sort of seen it as you're driving through. through downtown. There's not much there that they can really cause any problems. It's just under an overpass. So police not letting them get up the area and get onto I-5 to cause any traffic problems there tonight.
Yeah, it stands to reason why that's a dangerous situation for all involved. In Ferguson, rioters set the first building on fire about 2 hours ago, and since then about 7 buildings have burned. They set cars on fire, including a police car, and they're letting them burn in the streets as they broke out windows of other businesses. They lit garbage cans on fire, and they also shot guns in the air throughout the night. We've heard lots of reports of shots fired. We saw store windows shattered. Looters were stealing things. In one liquor store, they came out with armfuls of bottles of liquor. What's happening on the streets of Ferguson can only be described as a riot, which is what it is. The air is filled with tear gas, and it was only after rioters started throwing the rocks and bottles that police and SWAT teams moved in. All of this, ironically, as a season's greeting banner waved above the street. Of course, they're getting ready for the holidays there, and this is a turn that, although many expected, none want.
Let's go to Matt Lorch now, with more on what's happening tonight in Missouri. Matt.
Guys, it is downright scary what is going on right now. Ferguson is on fire. You know, within minutes of learning Officer Darren Wilson would not face charges, the protests erupted. Shots were fired outside police headquarters in Ferguson. People threw bottles at police, and those officers responded with tear gas and a show of force. Tear gas, fires, and unrest in Ferguson. Here people are seen looting from a local market. Police move in on a group of people breaking the window of a cop car.
We don't know what that sound was. There was some gunfire before.
Protesters responding after learning Officer Darren Wilson fired 12 times when he killed Michael Brown. The grand jury deciding Wilson fired in self-defense.
The duty of the grand jury is to separate fact from fiction. They determined that no probable cause exists to file any charge against Officer Wilson and returned a no true bill on each of the 5 indictments.
Within minutes of the announcement, the family of Michael Brown released a statement saying, "We are profoundly disappointed that the killer of our child will not face the consequence of his actions. We ask that you channel your frustration in ways that will make a positive change. We need to work together to fix the system that allowed this to happen." President Obama also called for calm while acknowledging why some communities do not trust police.
There are still problems, and communities of color aren't just making these problems up. Separating that from this particular decision, there are issues in which the law too often feels as if it is being applied in a discriminatory fashion.
Police and the National Guard moved in with armored vehicles. Frustration being felt.
They tear gas the girl. They throw gas on the girl. On top of her body, she's passed out.
Police have spent more than a month working with the community and church leaders in Ferguson and St. Louis, hoping to avoid the kind of violence that erupted after the police shooting in August.
The whole world is watching and watching how we respond and how we react.
And back in August, some witnesses had reported Brown was shot and killed with his hands up. But tonight, the prosecutor said those witnesses changed their statements and later admitted they never actually saw the 18-year-old with his hands up. The grand jury was made up of 12 people. 9 of them are white, 3 are black, and the majority are men. David?
Matt, thank you. On the phone now is Jim Fuda, and let's take a look at some of the live pictures here in Seattle of some of the protesters on the bridge. Jim Fuda has spent 33 years in local law enforcement here in the King County area. He worked on WTO and a number of other incidents. Jim, thanks for joining us tonight. As you're looking at some of the video and the scenes here and watching how Seattle police are handling the situation here in Seattle and then seeing what's happening in Ferguson, what's your first impression about what's going on tonight?
Well, I think what happened is a lot of reaction from some misinformation, some expectations that were not met by some people, and I think it's time for community leaders to get together with the police, get that information straightened out, and get some calm to the United States.
So, Jim, we're seeing protesters in Seattle trying to get up on I-5 through Cherry Street. They're trying to disrupt traffic through the area. They're sort of copying what's happening around the country. Seattle police are utilizing tactics that they've learned over the years, particularly through May Day this past year, to try to keep them off there, but some of them have gotten up there. So were you on the scene here tonight? What do you think in terms of what this has been like in Seattle about how things are being handled? Should people be concerned?
Well, I think, unfortunately, the Seattle Police Department and the local agencies here have had a lot of practice in through trial and error. I think we're doing the right thing. I think we're showing restraint, and we're trying to get things back to order the way that it should be.
One thing that I've noticed over the course of tonight is a lot of people were surprised that the decision out of Ferguson, Missouri came as late as it did. So all of these cities across the country have fallen on dark night, and you see protesters come out. You know, given your experience in law enforcement and when these protests turn violent, the cover of darkness seems to be a time that's even more dangerous. Is that true?
I think so. I think that if we, at least the agencies have had some time to prepare, to talk about it, and that's a tactic that I guess Ferguson decided would work best for them. But as we see, as word spreads throughout the country, and we get in, like I said, nightfall, then the other side of that coin is, my idea is thinking that, well, they thought that maybe a lot of the innocent people that are just doing their daily work day and things like that will be off the streets by this time.
But, you know, we're sort of scratching our head, Jim. We were sitting here earlier talking. That's understandable, but there are still neighborhoods where some of these rioters are moving out. They're creating damage. You've got fires that are spread out. Firefighters aren't going in there because of the danger, and they're letting it go on and on. But they talked about having a plan. You've been watching some of the coverage. How do you think that the response has been adequate tonight in Missouri?
From what I've seen, it looks like some things need to be done a little bit. They need to act a little bit more swiftly and pull the instigators and problems out of away from the peaceful crowd. And you can see what happens. And we learned from WTO is that you run out of policemen. We try to have a show of force and address a crowd, and then you have these offshoots that cause damage to the looting and the burning and things like that. So and you act as a unit, not individual officers going off and risking harm to themselves.
And what I'm sorry to interrupt you, but what we're seeing now as you speak is protesters did make their way, it appears, onto I-5, and traffic has now come to a stop. Our DOT camera has frozen, but here are pictures of the live situation on the ground. I'm interested in your take at the danger, obviously, in protesters getting onto the freeway right now, not only for themselves, but also for drivers, and the challenge for police to try and keep them off of the freeway when there are so many points of entry.
Yeah, I totally agree. Cars are going to. It becomes a logistic nightmare. You got people on the roads, and there's no control with when people are running on the freeway. I think SPD needs to act and act swiftly, and I'm sure they'll hopefully be calling in some other agencies to help them as well, as if this thing grows.
Yeah, we certainly will see that. And we're seeing some of the officers push what looks like pretty young teenagers or teenagers out of the way, trying to get them off the road, trying to say, hey, get out of the way because you're going to get hit by traffic. Somebody's got to get hurt here. You got to think that there'll be some troopers on scene here, if not already, sort of directing traffic around that area. And so they're trying to make a statement, obviously, tonight by creating as much chaos as they can here and to make an impact on people's lives as they block off the traffic there. But this creates a tremendous danger for people coming through here, for any drivers, and especially for what appears to be some of these young kids and young adults that are trying to make a point.
Well, we appreciate your insight tonight, Jim Fuda. I know you have a lot of years of experience, and as we watch this situation unfold, we all hope for safety tonight and that everybody goes home safely. We appreciate your time. Our James Lynch is right there on the ground. James, can you let us know exactly what you hear people saying, what officers are doing? I know we're watching it, but kind of set the scene for us.
Yeah, let me give you a little clarification first. They got up on the northbound off-ramp to Madison. They are not on the freeway proper. There is state patrol here. They have arrived. They are protecting that Cherry Street on-ramp where they initially tried to get on. There is also a couple of other state patrol troopers posted up around this area, but again, not on I-5, but on the northbound exit to Madison here in downtown Seattle. The police here now have taken control of this ramp. You can see them there with their bicycles, although from this vantage point. They seem to be surrounded by protesters on both sides. You got a small group of them now going back up to the top of this on-ramp where those protesters would indeed have access to I-5. Presumably, they are going to march them back down this ramp and off of the freeway there.
But Jim, have you seen any, James, have you seen any arrests yet at this point, or are they just moving people back down into the downtown area?
Yeah, so far, David, they're just moving people. No arrests that we have seen, although quite a few people were hit with the pepper spray in the face, probably a couple of dozen of them at least. But they came equipped, as they always do, with the milk solution that they have. As water doesn't help once it gets into the eyes, the milk tends to clear that pepper spray out of the eyes, and these people had that with them. A lot of them carrying backpacks with half gallons of milk in their backpacks, and they have been literally taking care of each other, cleaning each other's eyes out when they can't see at all.
James, one thing I want to bring up, and for folks at home, we are watching the DOT cameras, and there are backups on I-5 right now, at least in one direction. Jared, in the booth, can you tell which direction that is, the backups? We believe it's northbound where they're seeing backups right now. Hey, James, I'm noticing some people in masks. There's that as we continue to talk to James. I'm noticing masks on people. We had been watching over the last couple of hours that the protests were peaceful. When did the masks come out? Obviously, they were prepared for the possibility of some pepper spray or mace tonight. Was that when they tried to get onto I-5, is when they started to bring out some potential gear to deal with police tonight?
Yeah, that's exactly what they did. They had those masks on, and they had them in preparation for expecting the tear gas would come at one point or another. And as they tried to get onto I-5 via that Cherry Street on-ramp, that's when the tear gas started to fly, and that's when they pulled out the mask. We are seeing, if you can look there now, you do have a group of people there running along the highway on I-5 there. That is the northbound lanes, and there's just not a whole lot police can do right now. They seem to be running up there freely. We don't see any bicycle officers behind them. We don't see any cars behind them. We don't see any officers on foot, at least at this point.
And James, can you tell if, we were just talking to Jim Fuda, if they're calling for any backup? It seems like there's a police presence there, but depending on how they try to rein these people in and get them off the freeway, if they have assistance coming, can you tell where you are if they've got any more help?
Well, we have seen, like I said, State Patrol here for about the last 15 or 20 minutes on the off-ramp and on the freeway as well, in those northbound lines of the freeway, where now, as we change our vantage point here, perhaps we can get you a better look. Traffic appears to have come to a standstill there on I-5, but I'm not sure exactly why at that point, unless some of this crowd has got out further in front of us than we expected. But I do see the State Patrol now has blocked this off. If I can get Scott to swing over this way. Scott, you can see there the State Patrol has the northbound lanes. And Scott, if you lean out this way, you can see them actually on I-5 right there. They have successfully blocked traffic here just as you go beneath the Seattle Civic Center there, just to the north of the Madison Street exit. There you see another state trooper going up there to try to be of some help. I mean, this is a potentially dangerous situation if traffic was still flowing freely on I-5. Fortunately, they do have it stopped now at Madison Street, and they are now trying to see if they can get out there on foot, or at the very least get some bicycle officers out there to try to get those people off of the interstate.
For folks at home, this is something that we haven't seen, and certainly not in the last few years when we've covered protests on May Day. It usually stays within the city corridor and doesn't spill out onto the freeway. So you have to think that local police and state law enforcement also are dealing with another issue here as far as public safety is concerned, and the ramifications of the traffic there and the possibility they cross into both lanes of freeway.
Yeah, they're there at the Madison Street collector point there where you can get up on the off-ramp. They used to do this years and years ago, when there were the race riots around the country and in Seattle. You had people getting out on the roads, and the idea here tonight is, and there's looks like some officers that are running up there, and quite frankly, they need to start making arrests and get these guys off of there, and instead of pushing them around, because somebody's going to get killed by one of these drivers, and then it's going to be a real tragedy. So they need to move them out of there and take some real steps. But they used to do this a lot. I think what's happening is you've got all these young people, they've got their phones, and they're in communication with what's going on around the country. We've got scenes in New York, we've got scenes in Oakland, California, and other areas where they're blocking off the highways, they're blocking off the bridges to try to protest. They've been laying down in symbolism of Michael Brown when he was left laying on the ground for 4 hours while police investigated his death. And so that's what they've been doing. And so they're kind of copycatting that. I'd be very surprised if this was an original idea that some of these guys had, but they're sort of doing what the others have been doing around the country to kind of, make a mess here in Seattle, and they're successful.
And if you're just joining us, this is Seattle, where our protest here has shifted now, and we have people on I-5 blocking the northbound lanes. Just over the course of the last hour or so, police tried to confine them to the downtown streets, and there was a confrontation. Some of the protesters were sprayed with tear gas, and what you're seeing now is I-5 northbound completely shut down. Cars are not moving, and as David said, we may be seeing some arrests, just to the point that this is putting the public and the public safety in danger when you've got protesters interacting with cars at a high speed, and these drivers have no idea what's going on the streets of Seattle as they're zipping by on I-5. So you see more officers coming down on bikes now. Our James Lynch has been with this crowd, and it's been interesting over the course of the night. We have been watching the violence that's happening in Ferguson tonight, still at this hour after 1 o'clock in the morning there. And it has been peaceful all evening here in Seattle up until just this last moment where we've seen it shift, where the protesters wanted to extend their message. They wanted to jump onto the freeways and for whatever reason wanted to move it out of the streets of downtown, and it's causing an issue that you're witnessing.
Well, you can see they've got their hands up and they're moving them out of the way, and some of the protesters are holding up their hands. They're telling them to stay in place, or I would think they're telling them to move back, and at some point they're going to have to get those people out of there so that they can reopen the road, because right now, and I'm not sure if we can take the DOT camera, right now the traffic is just backing way up all the way down the road. That could be somebody that tossed something off the bridge down at police there, or off the top of the road down at the police. You saw them move back, and so you're going to see a pretty swift response here. You're going to see the captains order the officers to get in there and to take care of this, because if they're throwing Molotov cocktails or some kind of smoke bomb or some kind of firework that it seemed like that was, police don't know what that is, and you have a high incidence that if something like that hits somebody, you could have shots fired back, you could have all kinds of things can escalate very quickly if you start to get an officer hurt. So they're going to have to move in there and figure out what's going on. So you've got multiple scenes here that they're having to deal with. There is an incident command center. They have activated all of that, and so there's a lot of communication going on right now, but these young people are celebrating their success at shutting the road down, creating havoc for so many other citizens.
Yeah, and you have to imagine that the different police units are communicating with one another, letting each other know when they need a little bit more backup and assistance to get the situation under control. You also have to imagine that the mayor, Seattle Mayor Ed Murray, is watching this and helping and disperse crews and making sure that everyone needs to be where they should. In the days leading up to this, we were anticipating the decision out of Ferguson. All of the officials here in Seattle say they were prepared, given this riots that we have seen here and some of the demonstrations, especially on May Day. So they've got the people lined up. It's just trying to stay one step ahead of the protesters, giving them a place to peacefully walk, which they did for most of the night, and then making sure at the end of the night everybody goes home safely. And I think that's what we're seeing kind of interact right now between some of the protesters and police, making sure that the night ends.
So stay with us. We're going to take a real quick break. We'll be back with live coverage here and live coverage of all the fires and riots going on in Missouri.
Traffic on I-5 northbound is at a standstill tonight as protesters that were on the streets of downtown Seattle made their way onto I-5, and it has stopped the freeway at this point. Seattle police are saying individuals are now throwing large fireworks at officers at 7th and Madison. We saw officers down on the freeway right before where you see the traffic stopped, and protesters above were throwing things down at the officers. We also know they've been throwing some canned food and other items at them tonight. So officers certainly dealing with a different situation than we saw about an hour ago.
Yeah, they've been pulling those protesters off the highway and trying to get them back into downtown so they can reopen traffic. Let's go out to James Lynch, who has an up-close look at what's going on. James, fill us in.
Yeah, David, you can see this is still just south of Madison where the State Patrol has it blocked off. But if you can look off in the distance, you can see the cars are able to make their way over and take that Seneca exit and get back on somewhere north of here. But as you said earlier, when we saw that shot of police down on the freeway where they had those people down on their knees, when we heard and saw what looked like a big explosion, that was fireworks. But they were fireworks that had been used in more of a celebratory way earlier. They never threw them at police. They shot them in the air, and they weren't meant to use to hurt anybody, at least what we could see, or to use it as a weapon. But at that point, they did throw the fireworks right down on the freeway, right down where there were about a half a dozen police officers on their bikes. And I watched as they got off of their bikes and got away from that firework before it actually exploded, because as you know, that thing comes with a little bit of shrapnel. Most of it is paper and plastic, but it is something that could hurt an officer if it were to hit him in the face or hit him in the arm or the upper body or anything like that. So that's when they stepped in, and David, as you had been calling for a while tonight, started making arrests. Now, we don't know if they actually arrested these people or if they were just detained. For now, we don't know. We have seen in protests past where they would detain these people, get them out of the crowd. They appear to be troublemakers. They get them out of the crowd, settle things down a little bit, and then later that night they release them. But I got to imagine at this point that those will be arrests that they make, that those people are going to be taken into custody and taken down to the precinct. But as of now, things have kind of calmed down here just a little bit. The crowd is actually dispersed a little bit. The State Patrol is here in force, probably half a dozen cars to keep the peace here on the freeway. That is, David, as you know, their jurisdiction. We also have these Seattle police officers now who are just coming up off of the freeway. They have their nightsticks out, as you can see, David. They have their full riot gear on, and they do have had some tear gas with them as well. But so far, we haven't seen any of those people who were down on the interstate come back up here on Madison.
The DOT is telling us now that they are asking everybody to avoid I-5 through downtown Seattle at this point, that it is not worth it to try to get through because traffic is not going to reopen. So you want to divert and go around 99, or if you have to, go over 520 and then go around 405. But you don't want to get stuck in this because it's not going to go anywhere quickly until they make sure they've got all of those people that are cleared off of that. James, we're going to get back to you in just a minute. We want to take people out now to Ferguson, Missouri, where we know there have been 6 buildings that have been burned. There have been gunshots and looting tonight. Ferguson has been on fire. We want to get the very latest there. Here is one of the buildings, a big box store. This is a live look. This building has been burning for more than an hour now, and it's one of several all over the area as rioters spread out into the suburbs and continue to cause havoc and to create chaos and fear throughout that area.
The situation escalated pretty quickly after the grand jury's decision just after 6 o'clock tonight not to indict Officer Darren Wilson after the shooting death of Michael Brown that happened back in August. And in the hours that unfolded after that, we saw more buildings lit on fire. We saw rioting and looting. We saw officers moving in with tear gas as well. They were being tossed. People were tossing bottles at those officers as well. The crowds have dispersed tonight, but it's very early in the morning. It's also very cold in Ferguson tonight. I was hearing temperatures are dipping down into the 30s, so it is a chilly night there, right around freezing, and they're trying to get these situations under control to make sure that everybody makes it through the night safely. So we've got a couple of situations we're following. Obviously, this one in Ferguson, and tonight the developing situation here in Seattle with protesters making their way onto I-5, potential arrest here happening in our city as police deal with the decision coming out of Missouri. We will have much more coverage as Q13 continues right after the break. I'm going to take you back out live now to Ferguson, Missouri, where the fires continue to burn. We're getting new information tonight on the testimony that happened during the grand jury deliberation and the process of the grand jury as it regards to Officer Darren Wilson. And one of the things that we're learning tonight is Officer Wilson had never fired his gun on duty before shooting Michael Brown. He told the grand jury, asked if he had ever used excessive force before, and he replied, quote, "I've never used my weapon before." That's all according to testimony that was released just tonight. We're getting a lot of new details out of that paperwork. We're getting pictures as well and accounts from witnesses of what they saw and interpreted the night of that shooting in August of Michael Brown. And you're also looking on the right at pictures out of Seattle tonight where, there is Seattle tonight, where I-5 northbound is basically a parking lot because some protesters made their way down onto the freeway.
Yeah, they're making good progress in getting them back off into downtown so they can try to get this open, but DOT is telling you to avoid I-5 downtown for now. Let's go out to Jamie Tompkins. She's on the scene, and she can bring us up to date. Jamie, what are you seeing?
Yeah, hey, David, you guys want to avoid I-5 northbound at all costs. Take a look at the shot that we have here. You can see traffic is backed up pretty much quite a ways. There are 2 police cars down here. I'm also hearing from people on the street that police had apprehended police under this overpass that we're standing on here. We're at the corner of 7th and James. Again, take a look at I-5. You can see traffic just completely stalled here. People trying to get off at any exit they can. Many of them just stuck here on I-5 north. Again, this is traveling northbound. We've got police on the scene. There's been a lot of activity out here on the streets. About maybe 15 minutes ago, there were a group of people standing on this overpass here. They have left this area for right now, and right now all we know is that I-5 northbound is just completely blocked off. If you're traveling in this direction, you don't want to go anywhere near this part of the highway. We'll send things back inside to you guys.
Jamie, can you tell, are there any protesters left on the freeway? What's keeping the cars from moving? Can you see any police or protesters in front of you?
The only thing that's keeping the police from moving right now, or the cars from moving right now, are the police that are here on I-5 northbound. As you can see, those 2 flashing cars right there. We have not seen any protesters on the actual highway itself. There are a few people just kind of like onlookers this way right here. If you could just pan over there, Fernando, you can see we've got some police officers down there as well. There have been a lot of police officers out on the bikes just kind of in front of these protesters. We've got some police officers coming down this ramp right here too. Fernando, can you pan the camera that way? To your right, there you go. We've got some police officers on bicycles out here, and I've seen a lot of groups of cops like this on bike patrol, following the protesters, leading the protesters as well. They're trying to keep a good direction on where they're going. I did stop and talk to a few police officers at a gas station right near here, and I said to them, do you know where these guys are going? And they said, you know what, we don't know where they're going. We don't think they know where they're going. So right now, police are just trying to keep a handle on the situation. Again, they've got I-5 northbound shut down here at 7th and James. 2 police cars flashing, and actually one of them is moving now. Both cars are moving. Fernando, can you pan over to the highway, please? So both police cars moving now. It looks like they're going to let traffic start flowing right now. You can see it for yourself. So things are moving now on I-5 northbound at 7th and James. Marnie and David.
All right, Jamie.
So that is good to see because it's backed up all the way to Dearborn, which is several miles. It's going to take a while. As you can see, all the red taillights there, and that is going to take some time to clear out through this road. And so still best to avoid it if you can. Hop over on 99 or go around. It should be cleared, you know, hopefully in 30, 45 minutes. Just depends on how much they can get through there. Also, the police need to make sure that all of the other entrances around the city are blocked off so that little fringe groups can't go running up on there again and get run over or cause more traffic problems. So I'm sure that's part of what they're looking at, is to make sure they've got officers stationed at any of the ramps that are there to try to keep it going. But the good news is I-5 back open downtown.
All right, another look at Missouri, and they've got a dangerous situation there with fires still going on. In the last couple of shots that we've dipped into to see what's happening there, we have noticed that at least fire trucks have arrived on the scene and are now attempting to put some of these fires out. I think because of the threat of danger, they were staying out of those areas to begin with, but they've got a number of buildings under control. If you're just joining us or getting caught up on some of the coverage happening out of Ferguson, Missouri, it is early in the morning there, and they have had multiple buildings set on fire in addition to cop cars. We know there's been a Walmart and a Sam's Club and an AutoZone and a beauty supply store, a pizza place, and you name it. Businesses who have a lot of hardworking people that tomorrow are going to have to pick up the pieces of the damage that's been done tonight. The situation unfolds there as it does here in Seattle, and we continue to cover it here on Q13 Fox. Stay right there. We'll be back in a moment.
Welcome back to Breaking Coverage. And again, this is Ferguson, Missouri, where we're hearing that there has been another fire that has now been set. And this is right along West Florissant Road. You can see just a string of flyers, but they're telling us from police there that it is safe enough now for firefighters to start to get in there and start to fight some of these. And you see some of the traffic again that is moving in there, but still more fires being set in Ferguson, Missouri.
I'm also watching CNN, and they're going through some of the documents that were in the grand jury testimony, and I think there's a lot of interesting information as we kind of look overhead at the scene that's unfolding in Ferguson with all these fires. But some new details: the medical investigator did not take any photographs at the scene of Michael Brown's killing because the camera battery had died. This is part of the information the grand jury heard. And the investigator goes on to say the crime scene to collect evidence for a pathologist also didn't take any measurements or anything at the scene because they didn't need to. So more details will be coming out of just page after page after page of the information that the grand jury received and some of the witness testimony, and as we all try to piece together what happened that night and how the grand jury reached the decision that it did that resulted in all of the violence that we're seeing tonight.
Can I back up a second? The camera battery died?
The camera battery died.
Is that some kind of special measuring medical examiner camera?
I think it's a camera like
everybody has a camera.
I think it's a camera probably like you have at home, and the battery was dead, but that's what the grand jury heard in its testimony, that they did not have photographs after the crime scene because the battery had died.
60 different witnesses and hours and hours and hours, 75 hours of testimony. Well, tonight the grand jury's decision was announced. Officer Darren Wilson, of course, as we mentioned, has not been indicted.
And the grand jury decided the 28-year-old policeman shot in self-defense. Matt Lorch is here with the latest on the rioting that we're watching in Ferguson. Matt.
And guys, you were just talking about the evidence, and that's what reporters will now be going over the next few days to see what that grand jury dug into to come up with this decision to not charge Officer Wilson. In the meantime, it's going on 1 o'clock in Ferguson right now. In that live picture, we just saw 4 buildings on fire at a minimum. I was watching a live shot out of Ferguson. A reporter was standing there. Right around her, she counted 4 buildings on fire. This is a city under siege. Let's go to the latest video. Right now, we saw an AutoZone business on fire. This was a Little Caesars that was burning earlier. It's a total loss. Cars have been set on fire as well. Several explosions could be heard after this police car burned. Here you can see a crowd walk onto a highway looking to disrupt traffic. They shut down Highway 44 in Missouri. They were met by police in riot gear. And here you see people looting from a neighborhood market in Ferguson. Business owners had spent the last week boarding up. In this case, it just did not make a difference.
There are looters, and then there are, the crazies on the fringe who are trying to use this to incite violence. And it might be a very small fringe group, but certainly could be what's going on down on the southern edge of Florissant Avenue, where we've heard now in the past 20 minutes perhaps 60 gunshots.
60 gunshots from Ferguson to St. Louis. Every officer available is working tonight. The National Guard has been called in as well. They've been training in crowd control for this moment. But guys, they are overwhelmed. Tonight, there have been calls for calm from the parents of Michael Brown, from President Obama as well, who says we need to accept this decision was the grand jury's to make. Words that just don't seem to be having an impact in calming the unrest in Ferguson. Marnie.
All right, Matt, and we just got these pictures of the bruising to Officer Darren Wilson's face from the confrontation with Michael Brown that night. Though it is subtle, you can see the bruise on the right side of his face and then what appears to be a red mark on the back of his head. His full face shot doesn't look too bad, but you can see that his right cheek is swollen and his bottom lip has a red mark. Just a small part of the physical evidence that grand jury used in making its decision.
Protests in Seattle are now spinning a little bit out of control. Police on Cherry Street have been setting off the tear gas, the flashbangs, as the protesters try to get on northbound I-5. That has now reopened, though, but take a look at earlier. Yeah, as soon as the tear gas went off, some protesters covered their faces and walked away. A lot of them got sprayed right in the face. Others brought milk to pour into their eyes to try and stop the sting. And again, as we mentioned and we're covering, some got onto I-5. The Seattle Bicycle Police walked them back off of there, got them through the city, and they are still trying to go through the city, and they're just kind of wandering just like they did on the May Day protest. At least 30 protesters were out there trying to get on the freeway, and then they were moved back. And so, again, those protesters are in the city. They're not on the freeway, and I-5 has been reopened through downtown.
And it wasn't just protesters who got caught in the police response in Ferguson tonight. Reporters from major networks found themselves in the middle of smoke and pepper spray on live TV.
Tear gas. Tear gas. This tear gas just dropped right near us. It's going to get very bad here if we don't have masks. Yeah, so they're throwing it back. There are a lot of beanbags being shown and tear gas. We'll go to Susan Hendricks right now so we can clear the scene.
Yeah, reporters having a tough time breathing there. Some did wear gas masks so that they could move alongside the riders. Back now to Seattle, and we are watching the DOT cams as I-5 northbound gets moving. It's going to take a little while. That was a several-mile backup that started right there around Cherry Street and backed up clearly as far down as I-90 or so. A lot of traffic. Southbound seems to be moving okay at this point.
Yeah, just put yourself in the seats of those cars. There's going to be some very frustrated drivers tonight. Let's go out to James Lynch, who's getting his exercise following the protesters around the city. Where are you now, James?
David, we're still on the Madison Street overpass over I-5. You can look here behind us. As you said, traffic continues to move freely here. We did just see a couple of Seattle police officers in their squad cars with their lights on heading east back up toward Capitol Hill. Not sure exactly why they were headed up that way, but this area is pretty much calm now. The crowd has dispersed. We would imagine that at least right now that crowd, as large as it was, is not still one big crowd, but has splintered off into some smaller groups. One thing that I noticed about this protest, David, is that in the past, May Day, for instance, we had mostly a small group of bad actors amidst a group of larger legally protesting individuals. Here, when this one went bad, it seemed like the entire group went bad. Not everybody was up in police's face or trying to get on I-5, but they were egging each other on in a way that kept motivating them to take another step, to go a little bit further, to get onto that Madison Street off-ramp and then onto I-5. So in that sense, this protest has been different than the ones that we've seen in the past, David.
James, let me ask you a question. I'd seen that Macklemore tweeted out a picture earlier. Did that help or hurt things that he was out there tonight earlier? Did it call more people to come out and join these young people?
Well, you know, I can't say one way or another, David. I didn't see him. Any of the protesters that were around where I was didn't see him. So I don't know if that had any effect on the protest whatsoever. After all, as you and Marnie said earlier, that the people have been calling for peace all the way up to the president all week long. Peace. Let's have a peaceful protest all around the country. And unfortunately, that hasn't been the case in most major cities, David.
James, we're also hearing that there's been some vandalism up Madison Street. I know that most of the crowd has dispersed, but before they did so, I know it's a bit of organized chaos, kind of an oxymoron, but did it seem like anyone was in charge directing people as to where they might go next, or did they just kind of scatter? We're trying to get an idea as to where they may be heading.
You know, I don't know. There hasn't been any central organization. There have been a couple of people with bullhorns that seem to have been directing the group one way or another as they were marching peacefully. Let's take a turn here. Let's take a turn there. Let's go straight here. But no kind of organized route that they had. As Jamie said earlier tonight, the police didn't know where they were going, and they didn't think that the crowd knew where they were going either. But they made great strides in crisscrossing the city in a way that I haven't seen it before in protests that we've seen in the past. Morning.
All right, James, we thank you. You stay out there and be safe, and we'll check back in with you in a little bit. Meantime, here is the traffic camera of I-5 northbound. They still have James and the Madison Street exits closed as they make sure that they can get all those cars safely through there and then back up to freeway speeds. We're continuing to monitor the situation in Seattle because I would anticipate it's not over yet.
You're getting a report of rocks being thrown at officers at 10th and Pike, which is as you move up into the Capitol Hill area, which is where they went on May Day. Also, they kind of worked their way up there towards the end of the protest, and so when officers start getting projectiles thrown at them, they're going to respond and take some into custody and arrest them. And so we'll try to get a crew over there and bring you the very latest as it sort of escalates somewhat now to physical violence against the officers as the protests get more angry tonight.
They are going to be concerned about traffic through Capitol Hill. They were telling people to avoid I-5. If you don't want to be any part of these situations that are happening in our great city, you're going to want to avoid this area of Capitol Hill tonight and just stay here and watch our coverage.
Well, Seattle Mayor Ed Murray did speak out earlier to our city's minority community. He told them that Seattle is committed to moving forward so that together we can bring a greater sense of justice.
Many outside the African community stand in solidarity with the African American community at this time of anguish and anger and alienation, including myself, the council members, and community leaders across this city.
The mayor and the police chief both urged protesters to remain lawful as they appeared with a group including several leaders of local community organizations and state lawmakers. And so a little bit earlier tonight, there were some reports of some of the protesters throwing rocks at the officers right there at 10th and Pike. They've now moved on. They did try to get up on I-5, create some of the problems there where they shut down traffic. But the mayor was insistent that as long as they remain peaceful, they certainly want them to have their right to, say their word, to get their message across. It's when they try to create problems for the rest of our community that it becomes an issue or create a danger for other people.
Back now to our live pictures at Capitol Hill where our crews are on the scene there, and you can see police in riot gear have now surrounded what appears to be a group of protesters and people gathering in the street attempting to block traffic. They've got their signs. Many of these people we've been following for the last few hours, and most of them have not caused too many problems. You always have some in the bunch, though, that disturb the peace and that vandalize property and try to get in the way or in the face of police officers. And unfortunately, we have again seen that unfold here in Seattle. The last time we had a situation like this, of course, was May Day, and we did have some tense moments throughout that. So we know that this can escalate quickly. As you watch it, you just hope that officers are able to keep the peace. They usually stand at bay and let the people, as you said, David, express their message as it is their right to do in a peaceful way and to not harm anyone or damage any property. So you can see they're chanting tonight. Let's listen in real quick and see if we can hear what they're saying.
Yeah, they're basically saying no justice, no peace. This is one of those splinter groups that we said that broke off from the larger crowd that was on I-5 earlier. They've now made their way back up to Capitol Hill. This is 12th and Pike. We have a line of police officers, as you can probably see, most of them in riot gear, trying to prevent them from moving to points west here along Pike Street. So they are having an impromptu rally here. No justice, no peace. Hands up, don't shoot. The chants that we've heard all day. So far, police are just kind of keeping them at bay here at this intersection right now. But they do have officers here in riot gear. They do have tear gas at the ready should it be needed. We can only hope that it tries to stay as peaceful as possible here for the rest of the evening.
James, you said this was a splinter group, so is there a larger group of protesters still in downtown or another part of Seattle?
Well, David, when I said splinter group, I mean, I believe that this was a smaller group that broke off from the larger group once the tear gas first came out when we were down at I-5 and Cherry. The crowd began to disperse there, and this group has come together back up on Capitol Hill. There is not nearly as many. I'd say probably roughly maybe 100, maybe, chanting here in the middle of the street. They have this intersection completely blocked off at 12th and Pike. And as I said, police are here in riot gear trying to make sure that it stays peaceful and doesn't get out of hand again.
James, you obviously have a better vantage point than we do. Can you tell at all, are there the people in the crowd who we earlier saw wearing masks or potentially the ones who were throwing fireworks that maybe had backpacks that looked like they were going to cause any trouble? Do you see any of those people in the group at all from where you're standing?
Well, most of those were wearing all black. They had black hoodies on and they had black masks. Some of these people do have masks on, presumably to protect them from the tear gas. But as I said earlier, this seems to be more of an entire group in terms of there aren't just a few bad actors in between, but there seem to be a larger group here, about 100, that are motivating each other. But so far, they are just up in police's face. I haven't seen anything thrown since I've been here. I haven't seen anybody reach out toward the police, and right now police aren't trying to move them. They're just holding them here at this intersection.
No justice, no peace is their message. How disruptive is this group to traffic in the area of Capitol Hill where you are, James?
Well, the best advice would be to stay out of this area because Pike and 12th at that intersection is totally blocked off. Nobody's going east or west. Nobody's going north or south right now. The crowd here controlling this intersection basically with police standing here at the ready. They do have their signs up. They are chanting here. We have heard a lot of profanity. We've heard a lot of screaming at police officers, but they are maintaining their composure as they do all along. And they are, so far, this intersection right here has been peaceful since we've been here, and that's all of about 6 minutes that we've been here.
All right, James Lynch live on the scene in Capitol Hill as police and riot gear surround a crowd of protesters who are blocking the street. Our live coverage continues right here on Q13 Fox right after this. Our crews are in Seattle monitoring the situation. Let's toss it right back out to James. It looks like things have escalated once again. James, what's going on?
Yeah, we're still here at the corner of 12th and Pike. Police have brought in some reinforcements. You can probably see there are even more bicycle police officers here. And if I get Scott to swing around, you can see that they have even more back there. They've kind of tried to even out the numbers between protesters and police officers. These were bicycle officers that at first were just in their uniforms. Now they're in more of a riot gear kind of situation. They have the chest plates and the back plates that you can see right there on those officers for a little added protection. And you have a little of these protesters tending to get into the face of police officers more than they have in the past. We actually can see a couple of police officers right now with their pepper spray in their hands. So we're going to stay here. Right now it's just chanting and it's peaceful. We'll hope it stays that way. Now back to you guys.
All right, James, thank you. We'll take a quick break and be back right after this.